next up, Sam Harris, author of the New York Times bestsellers The End of Faith and Letter to a Christian Nation, co-founder of the Reason Project, and just completing, still completing, his doctorate in neuroscience at UCLA. Yeah, Sam Harris.
Thank you, Jonathan. You were very Christian. Now I'm going to repudiate everything you just said. All right. Well, so as some of you know, one of my primary concerns is the way in which neuroscience and our understanding of ethics and human well-being at the level of the brain is going to transform our notion of right and wrong and good and evil. And a plausible title for this talk would be, "Can we ever be right about right and wrong?" It seems to me that to understand our minds at the level of the brain would be to understand all of those forces, reciprocity and intuitions of fairness, openness to evidence and argument, all of the things that allow friends and neighbors to collaborate together on the common projects of civilization. And I think using this knowledge to help improve our circumstance is one of the primary challenges to science in the coming decades. Now, as I think all of you know, David Hume quite famously told us that you can't derive an ought from an is. And G.E. Moore followed him and said that any attempt to locate morality in the natural world would be to commit the naturalistic fallacy. And many other philosophers have followed suit. Karl Popper echoed these notions. I think it's difficult to overstate the effect of this line of reasoning in Western science and psychology. I mean, this has essentially created a firewall between facts and values in our discourse. And while psychologists and neuroscientists study morality and positive emotion and human happiness now, they very rarely make normative claims about how we should think and behave in light of their findings. It seems to be generally thought somewhat intellectually disreputable or even vaguely authoritarian for a scientist to ever say that there's something in his research or her research that actually should guide us in how we live our lives. Now, scientific reticence on the subject of norms, I think, has come at a terrible price. It has made science appear divorced in principle from the most important questions in human life. It has made science seem like a mere incubator of technology. And religious people in all faiths and on both sides of the political spectrum are united on precisely this point. Though they can agree about little else, they agree that scientific methodology and modes of reasoning and standards of evidence have no application whatsoever on questions of meaning and morality and goodness and value. And as comes as no surprise, the most common justification one hears for belief in God now is not that there's compelling evidence that God exists, but that belief in him is the only source of meaning, moralities, and value. It seems to me that the doubts we have in this community, the scientific community, about the application of scientific reasoning to meaning and morality has given a mandate to superstition and therefore sectarian conflict. And the greater the doubt, the greater the impetus to nurture divisive delusions. In the public imagination, evolution is equated with selfishness as some kind of biological imperative, so that with the absence of a morality, essentially. And the fact that we haven't demolished this fallacy has been extremely unhelpful, both for the practice of science and for the public understanding of its products and the importance of scientific thinking and the difference between scientific thinking and the rest of what we do with our lives. Now, needless to say, human cooperation and its attendant moral emotions they're perfectly compatible with biological evolution. I mean, we are not merely atomized selves disposed to serve our own interests. We are also social selves disposed to serve a common project with others. Now, it's true that there's a limit to our sensitivity and concern for the suffering of others, but those limits are themselves part of our personal and collective concern. Most of us want other people's hopes to be realized. Most of us want to live in fair and just societies. And most of us want to leave the earth a better place than we found it. Now, claims about morality and human well-being are claims about the architecture of our minds and the social architecture of our world. So as such, they are claims about facts. I mean, they are claims about facts constrained by natural law and statistical law. And as such, a person can be right or wrong, or more or less informed with regard to them. And this is not to say that there's only one moral precept in any given situation. I mean, morality can be a lot like food. It's not like there's one right food. But there is still an objective distinction between food and poison. Okay, there's a biologically contingent distinction, there's a historically contingent distinction perhaps, but we're still in the range of objectivity here. So it's possible to be mistaken about what will actually maximize human well-being. And it's possible for groups of people to be mistaken. It is, therefore, possible to be part of a pathological culture or subculture. I mean, there is such a thing as moral high ground, and it is possible not to be standing on it. Now, I think there is little doubt that we will one day come to understand right and wrong and good and evil in scientific terms. One moral outlook will be truer than another if its view of the relation between thought and intention and emotion and behavior and human well-being is truer than another. And because human well-being is realized at the level of the brain, an emerging and maturing brain science will have a lot to say about right and wrong and human well-being. So hence, I think there is unavoidably a collision coming between science and popular opinion on this terrain, just as there has been on evolution, on what it is to flourish, on what goodness is in the public domain. And I think, obviously, definitive answers on certain questions are already within reach. I mean, does forcing women and girls to wear burqas make a net contribution to human well-being? I mean, does it make for happier men and women? Does it make for more compassionate men or more confident and contented women? Does it make for better relationships between girls and their fathers or boys and their mothers? I think the answer, we do not need an NSF grant to make headway on this. The answer is in plain view. And yet most scientists have been trained to think that this kind of judgment is a kind of cultural imperialism. Who are we to say that the denizens of this ancient culture should conform to our notions of gender equality? Who are we not to say that? I mean, in this case, we're talking about a culture, or at the very least a subculture, of the purest misogyny and religious bamboozlement. Now, students of philosophy, or at the very least Pat Churchland, will know that I'm now committing myself to some form of moral realism and some form of consequentialism. I'm saying, one, that moral truths exist, and two, they relate exclusively to the well-being of conscious creatures like ourselves. Now, as many of you know, moral realism and consequentialism have both come under pressure in philosophical circles. And unfortunately, in the space of 15 minutes, I don't have time to fully prop up both of these views. That will be the subject of a long and boring chapter in my dissertation. But I think I should touch on a few points. Consequentialism has been a notorious engine of moral dilemma. I mean, should I, for instance, is it ethical for me to save the life of my only child if this causes me to neglect to save a stranger's brood of 8? Many smart people who have thought about problems like this have come to think that morality doesn't track the laws of arithmetic. And in fact, it may not. It seems to me quite possible, if given an eternity to think about it, that we might all agree that having a bias towards friends and family may actually be preferable than a society in which we're all dispassionately unconcerned about how consequences accrue.